Righty guys, so this here has to be the cheapest, brightest, and biggest monitor I've ever used. And to be honest, like, I was a little bit skeptical of the Lilliput H7, but seriously, this has completely blown me away. How's it going guys? My name is Andrew Murphy from Down Under in Gold Coast, Australia. So I've been using the Andy A6 Pro 5-inch field monitor for a while now, and that has really been great. Also, just real quick side note, Andy is not my brand. The amount of people that message me and they're like, oh, is this your like monitor brand? No, it's just another brand. Got nothing to do with me. They are great, but anyway, I really struggled when it came to outdoor shooting on the Andy A6 Pro. Number one, it's only 500 nits, which is super dim, especially if you're shooting outdoors. And number two, it has a gloss finish on the screen, so the reflections basically make it impossible to shoot outdoors. So I did some digging online and found a few different monitors that piqued my interest, but then I stumbled across the Lilliput H7 7-inch monitor, and like when I saw that the price was only $210 US, I thought like, even if this is complete trash, it's not that expensive, it's worth the risk if it is good. And the reason I was skeptical is that for $210 US, it's 1800 nits, which is over 3 times brighter than my current monitor, plus it's 7 inches, which is bigger than my current monitor. Like, I don't really have anything to lose. But since it's arrived and I've been testing it out, safe to say, I am absolutely blown away by this. Like, for the price, you can barely get a decent 5-inch monitor that is brighter than 500 nits. So I don't know what sorcery's gone to this. I don't know how this is actually possible for the price. So quickly, some specs on this. It's a full plastic design, has a 1080p 7-inch display, can accept up to DCI 4K at 24 frames a second, runs off 2 AMP batteries, which are hot swappable, 1800 nits brightness, HDR ready, 3D lights, and most of the metering tools like histogram, peaking, false colors, etc. It has a HDMI in and out and accepts a 7 to 24 volt DC input, and it uses approximately 16 watts of power at full brightness. So firstly, let me just show you how bright 1800 nits is, because what's interesting is when you first get it out of the box, it isn't on the brightest mode, it's on like a medium mode, so it's a little bit deceiving. But comparing this to a few different monitors that I had and Jason had lying around, firstly on the left you'll see the Andy A6 Pro, and that is a 500 nit brightness screen. It's literally night and day. You can see what I mean by it. It's basically impossible to see this monitor outdoors. Now what's actually interesting is that 500 nits is what a lot of monitors basically use nowadays, so keep this in mind when you're actually buying a monitor. Now on the right of the H7 is the Portkeys HS7T, which is a 1200 nit 7-inch display, and that's much closer, but it's still not as bright as the H7. Now quickly as well, once you actually get this monitor, to max out the brightness on the H7, you need to navigate to the system and then backlight brightness and then turn this to high. I also recommend as well changing the scan mode to pixel as well, because I shoot in DCI 4K, and if it's not on this, it kind of like stretches the image weird and doesn't really work as well. Now going back to the Portkeys HS7T, that was actually one of the monitors that I was looking at potentially getting, because Jason has it, and Jason you've seen on this channel, he has it, and I've used it a couple of times on a couple of my shoots, just like borrowing off him, and I was really impressed by the build quality of that, and also the fact that it has MPF pass-through mount on the back of the monitor itself. But the number one thing that I absolutely cannot stand about that monitor, and what actually like drove me away from it, is that it has a glass panel over the front, which means that it just reflects everything like crazy. And you can see exactly what I mean in this shot, where the reflections on the HS7T are really noticeable, but the Lilliput H7 performs so much better. And I think that is because it has some sort of coating on the screen, which makes it much less reflective. And this is great for when you're shooting outdoors, or basically in any environment where you have something bright behind you. Now we also threw in the Atomos Ninja V as well for fun. This is a 1000 nit 5-inch monitor, and again it's bright, but it's not as bright, and again you can see with the reflections on the screen, it makes it really hard to see even though it is quite bright. Now in terms of actual performance, being a 1080p display means it's not going to be the sharpest on the market, but I haven't really had any problems with it like not being sharp enough for me. Now after shooting a ton on the Andy 5-inch, I really want to step it up to a 7-inch, because I just found on the 5-inch like you couldn't necessarily see everything potentially in the frame, and this has definitely made it a lot easier. Plus, it's actually really easy to focus manually on this as well, even without having focus peaking turned on. Like, the sharpness of the screen is decent enough. However, if you do actually switch on the focus peaking on the monitor itself, it actually performs really good, although I usually always still opt for the focus peaking on my Canon C70 and just push that out to the monitor itself. Now, the H7 does have false color as well, which is a great option if you don't have it in your camera, but it's not super accurate. So if we compare it to the internal false color on the Canon C70, it seems to think that everything is a little bit brighter than it actually is. And unfortunately, there isn't a way to like kind of adjust this setting or compensate for it on the monitor itself. Another awesome feature is the fact that it has 1/4-20 threads on all 4 sides of the monitor. And this doesn't seem like a big issue, but honestly, it's funny how like on the odd occasion where you need to mount this on an awkward or like on the opposite side to what you'd normally do it, having these there is actually really, really handy. So this is achieved by placing all of the I/O on the bottom of the monitor, and they've also left a decent space between like the mount on the bottom of the monitor and all the inputs. So even if you have to use like a wide mount or like, you know, like a swivel mount to mount this to your camera, you're not limited to what you can actually plug in. They can also get this in an SDI model as well. I think it's just a Lilliput H7S on the end. Basically exactly the same, it just says 2 SDI ports on the bottom, so an input and an output. Now, with the build quality being all plastic, it's not as rugged as say something like the Portkeys H7ST, which is an all metal design. If they did offer a metal housing, I'd jump on it straight away. Like, that would be absolutely amazing. But for the time being, I've actually ordered a metal cage, so that will just help me like when I'm obviously swiveling it, and potentially if like you have any knocks or bangs and stuff, it'll just protect it a little bit more. Right, so the cage actually ended up coming, and I am really impressed by this. If you are going to get this monitor, hands down 100% get the cage, because it just protects it so much more. It is like quite cheaply built. When it arrived, this top plate was actually assembled the wrong way, so it was backwards and didn't really fit. But I just kind of like unscrewed it, put it back together, and since then it's been great. Like, it holds it really sturdy. It basically takes all the pressure off the plastic mounts, and it puts it onto the actual like aluminium cage itself. But yeah, in terms of just like longevity and like making this monitor last, definitely get a cage. You will thank me for it, guaranteed. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that the H7 is not touchscreen. So if you're not coming from a touchscreen monitor, this is not going to be new to you. But if you are coming from a touchscreen monitor, it's just something to get used to. And for me, like, I didn't really use the touch function on the Cine A6 Pro anyway, so it's not that big of a deal for me. Basically, for all monitors, I just set up the main things that I'm going to use it for that I need to change on the function buttons, and then that is basically it. For my setup on this, I've set function 1 to be false colors and function 2 to be an image flip, and I've done that because then I can actually quickly go into like an underslung monitor thing, and then I can basically like adjust my grips and make this a mini shoulder rig really, really quickly. Now, one of the biggest downsides of this monitor for me personally is that it doesn't have anamorphic squeeze built in. So if you don't shoot anamorphics, absolutely fine, this isn't going to be an issue for you. But if you do, you'll know that most cameras that have built-in anamorphic modes mostly just have like a 1.33 squeeze and a 2x squeeze, and that's about it. And with the rise of budget anamorphics coming out and all these new squeeze factors like 1.5, 1.6, 1.8, you need a monitor that can actually do a custom de-squeeze in case your camera can't actually output that. Now, another thing to keep in mind, and this issue only happened once and I haven't had any other problems with it, but one time when I was shooting, the monitor started doing this weird flickering thing. It was just like a little bit annoying. It didn't really affect anything else. It was just kind of an annoying thing, but then kind of like left it for a bit, came back, and it seems to have figured itself out. So don't know exactly what was going on there, but thought I'd mention it. So I did actually end up getting this flickering again on the monitor. I think it's actually a power issue. So basically it can accept 7 to 24 volts of power, but the optimal power that it likes is 7.4 volts. So basically I was running it through, I think I was running 12 volts into it through my kind of like V-lock distribution plate, but I ended up putting it down to 8 volts, and it seems to have fixed the problem so far. It's also really hard to show what's happening because obviously like if you try film a screen and it's a low refresh rate, sometimes it flickers. It's kind of just like a little mini flash, I guess. It's kind of like it's flickering. Yeah, it's hard to explain, but again, wanted to let you guys know. But anyway, I am a huge fan of the Lilliput H7 monitor, and honestly, I would highly recommend checking this out, especially if you're on a budget and you're wanting a 7-inch monitor and something that is really, really bright. There's literally nothing else on the market that can beat this currently for this price. Anyway guys, if you did enjoy this video, then consider liking and subscribing to the channel. If you want to find out more about the Lilliput H7, I'll leave some links down below. Otherwise, stay creative and just be you. Have fun.